You need to move to the back. This section isn't for people like you." Veronica Hartwell didn't whisper it. She announced it like airport policy, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. Her diamond-laden fingers pointed toward the economy section as she stared down at Dr. Simone Richards, the brilliant aerospace engineer, sitting quietly in seat 1A. Blake Hartwell, her husband, nodded in agreement. "She's right. We paid for premium seats not to sit next to, well, you understand." What they didn't understand was that in exactly 14 minutes, the woman they were trying to humiliate would ground their flight with a single phone call, and by the end of the day they'd be banned from every major airline in the country. Before we dive into this incredible moment where prejudice met its match, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe competence should always triumph over prejudice, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Dr. Simone Richards sat in the plush leather seat of Global Wings Flight 447, her tablet displaying complex navigation diagrams that looked like digital art to untrained eyes. At 36, she was the lead avionics engineer for Aerotech Industries, the brilliant mind behind the Navicore flight management system that guided 80% of commercial aircraft safely through the skies. Today, she was traveling to Frankfurt for the International Aviation Safety Summit, where she would receive the Pioneering Women in Aerospace Award. She'd earned this first-class seat through 12 years of 80-hour work weeks, through being the only black woman in countless boardrooms, through designing technology that had prevented thousands of potential disasters. Her simple black blazer and understated jewelry revealed nothing of her status as one of the most respected engineers in aviation. She preferred it that way. Let her work speak for itself. The Hartwells had different ideas about who belonged where. Blake Hartwell, 52, carried himself with the swagger of inherited wealth and unearned confidence. His platinum elite status with Global Wings was his most prized possession, a golden ticket he wielded like a weapon whenever he encountered anything that didn't align with his worldview. Real estate had made him rich, but entitlement had made him dangerous. Veronica Hartwell, 48, had married into this world of privilege and defended it like a fortress. Her designer handbag cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she made sure everyone knew it. To her, the first-class cabin wasn't just transportation. It was her personal kingdom, and she didn't appreciate uninvited guests. They'd arrived at Gate 23 fashionably late, expecting their usual royal treatment from the Global Wings staff. The Airbus A380 sat waiting, already delayed 45 minutes, due to what the gate agent had vaguely described as technical issues. In reality, the aircraft was experiencing a critical navigation computer failure that had stumped 3 different ground maintenance teams. As they boarded, Blake flashed his elite membership card like a badge. "We'll need champagne immediately," he announced to Sarah Martinez, the 28-year-old flight attendant who was working her 3rd month on the job. Sarah nodded nervously, already sensing the entitled energy radiating from the couple. The Hartwells made their way to row 1, expecting to find their usual configuration. Blake in 1C, Veronica in 1B and 1A, either empty or occupied by someone they deemed appropriate. Instead, they found Dr. Richards settled comfortably in the window seat, reviewing technical specifications with the focused intensity of someone whose work saved lives. That's when Veronica issued her royal decree. Dr. Richards looked up from her tablet, her dark eyes meeting Veronica's blue ones without flinching. She'd heard variations of this demand before, in college dining halls, at professional conferences, in restaurant waiting areas. The words changed, but the poison remained the same. "I'm in my assigned seat," she replied calmly, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being underestimated. Blake stepped closer, his shadow falling across her tablet screen. "Don't make this difficult, sweetheart. We're Platinum Elite members. We have certain expectations about our flight experience." The word sweetheart hung in the air like sulfur. Dr. Richards had 3 engineering degrees, held 17 aviation safety patents, and had personally prevented more aircraft accidents than either of these people would ever know. She was many things, but nobody's sweetheart. "I understand you have expectations," she said, her tone remaining level. "I also have a confirmed seat assignment and the right to occupy it without harassment." Sarah Martinez watched the confrontation unfold from the galley, her stomach knotting with anxiety. Company policy was clear about customer service, but it was also clear about non-discrimination. She'd grown up in East LA, where she'd seen plenty of this kind of casual racism disguised as policy enforcement. Now she was caught between her desire to do the right thing and her desperate need to keep her job. Other passengers were beginning to notice. David Kim, a tech blogger traveling to a conference in Berlin, discreetly activated his phone's camera function. He'd seen enough viral videos to recognize a moment that needed documentation. In seat 2D, elderly businessman Frank Morrison shook his head in disgust, remembering a time when such confrontations were even more commonplace. "Look, honey," Veronica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. Sarah, could you please help this lady find where she's supposed to be sitting? I'm sure there's been some kind of mix-up with the seating chart." The implication was crystal clear. People who looked like Dr. Richards didn't belong in first class. The assumption was that her presence here had to be some kind of error, a booking mistake, a computer glitch, anything other than the simple reality that she'd earned her place through merit and hard work. Dr. Richards felt the familiar burn of anger rising in her chest, but she'd learned long ago that emotion was the enemy of effectiveness. They wanted her to lose her temper to become the difficult passenger they could then justify removing. Instead, she reached into her leather portfolio and withdrew her boarding pass, holding it up so the seat assignment was clearly visible. "As you can see, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Blake's face reddened. 25 years of getting his way through bullying and intimidation had not prepared him for calm, rational resistance. "Do you know who we are?" he demanded, pulling out his phone to display his airline app. "Platinum Elite status. We've spent over $80,000 with this airline in the past year alone." "That's impressive," Dr. Richards replied. "I'm sure Global Wings appreciates your business. It doesn't change the fact that I have a valid ticket for this seat." The exchange was attracting more attention now. Passengers in nearby rows had put down their books and magazines, sensing drama in the air. Elena Vasquez, the gate agent who had processed Dr. Richards's boarding, was called to the aircraft to address what Blake loudly described as a seating irregularity. Sarah approached hesitantly, her hands trembling slightly. "Dr. Richards, I wonder if you might consider, that is, we have some lovely seats available in our premium economy section." The suggestion hit like a slap. Premium economy, because surely that was more appropriate for someone who looked like her regardless of what her ticket actually said. Dr. Richards studied Sarah's face and saw not malice but fear. The young woman was being pressured by passengers whose elite status carried real weight with management. "I appreciate the offer," Dr. Richards said quietly, "but I'll be remaining in my assigned seat." That's when Blake decided to escalate. "Sarah, I need you to call security. We have a passenger who's being deliberately disruptive and refusing to follow crew instructions." The lie came so easily it was clearly well practiced. In Blake's world, any resistance to his demands constituted disruption. Any refusal to defer to his perceived authority was automatically illegitimate. He'd used this exact strategy dozens of times before. Paint the other person as the problem, invoke the authority of airline staff, and watch as social pressure did the rest. Dr. Richards remained perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene. Around the cabin, other passengers were beginning to murmur. Some were clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Others seemed to be waiting to see how the drama would resolve itself. David Kim made a decision. He switched his phone to video mode and began recording openly, knowing that documentation was the only protection against revisionist history. "This is David Kim reporting from Global Wings Flight 447, he said quietly into his phone. "We're witnessing what appears to be a racially motivated incident in the first-class cabin. A black passenger with a valid ticket is being asked to move by white passengers who claim her presence is somehow inappropriate." The word inappropriate crystallized everything that was wrong with this moment. Dr. Richards's skin color was inappropriate. Her quiet dignity was inappropriate. Her refusal to be moved was inappropriate. In Blake and Veronica's worldview, her very existence in their space was a violation of natural order, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. As the tension mounted and security was called, none of them knew that the woman they were trying to humiliate had designed the very computer networks keeping their aircraft safely grounded until the technical crisis could be resolved. None of them knew that in a few minutes those same networks would fail catastrophically, and the only person capable of fixing them was sitting quietly in seat 1A, enduring their casual cruelty with the patience of someone who had seen it all before. The storm was gathering, and they were about to learn that sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the person you need most. Sarah Martinez's hands shook as she made the call that would change everything. "Security to gate 23, please. We have a passenger situation that needs resolution." Elena Vasquez arrived at the aircraft door within minutes, her supervisor badge catching the overhead lights. Behind her came 2 airport security officers, their presence instantly escalating the tension in the cabin. Every passenger was now fully invested in the unfolding drama phones, discreetly recording conversations, stopping mid-sentence. "What seems to be the problem here?" Elena asked, though her eyes had already found the source of the conflict. She recognized Dr. Richards from the gate, remembered the polite smile and crisp boarding pass. This was not a passenger who caused problems. Blake stepped forward, his chest puffed with righteous indignation. "This woman is refusing to follow crew instructions and creating a disturbance. As Platinum Elite members, my wife and I have certain expectations about our travel experience, and we shouldn't have to deal with this kind of disruption." The way he said this woman carried decades of coded language. Not the passenger or Dr. Richards or even the lady in 1A. Just this woman spoken with the dismissive tone reserved for people he considered beneath his notice. Veronica nodded emphatically. "We specifically requested seats in row 1 because we value the peace and quiet. Instead, we find this situation." She gestured vaguely at Dr. Richards as if her mere presence constituted a crisis. Elena looked confused. What exactly did she do that was disruptive? Blake's face reddened. "She's refusing to move when asked politely. We've been loyal customers of this airline for over 15 years, and we've never had to deal with this level of resistance to reasonable requests." "What requests?" Elena asked, her voice growing sharper. "To relocate to a more appropriate section," Veronica interjected smoothly. "Surely someone of her background would be more comfortable in economy. We're just thinking of everyone's best interests here." The mask was slipping. The careful language about expectations and appropriateness was giving way to something uglier and more honest. Dr. Richards remained perfectly still, watching the interaction with the analytical eye of an engineer studying a malfunction. She'd seen this particular malfunction many times before. David Kim's live stream was gaining viewers by the minute. His commentary was drawing attention from social media influencers and news outlets. "You guys, this is absolutely unreal," he whispered to his phone. "We're watching a highly educated black woman being harassed by entitled passengers who think first class belongs to them exclusively." Comments were flooding in from viewers around the world. Flight discrimination was beginning to trend. Screenshots were being shared across platforms. The story was escaping the confines of the aircraft before it had even finished unfolding. Dr. Richards finally spoke, her voice carrying across the cabin with crystal clarity. "I'm Dr. Simone Richards. I'm the lead systems engineer for Aerotech Industries. I designed the navigation computers that keep aircraft like this one safely in the sky. My ticket was purchased by my company for business travel to an international aviation conference. I am not moving." The words landed like bombs in the sudden silence. Several passengers gasped audibly. Frank Morrison, the businessman in 2D, started laughing, a harsh, bitter sound. "Well, I'll be damned," he said loudly. "Blake, you just tried to throw off the woman who probably designed half the safety networks on this plane." Blake's confidence wavered for the first time. That's completely irrelevant. Airline seating isn't based on job titles." "You're right," Dr. Richards agreed calmly. "It's based on ticket purchases and seat assignments, both of which I have. If you're watching this unfold and feeling your blood pressure rise with indignation, you're not alone. Hit that like button if you want to see how this story ends, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when they push the wrong woman too far." Elena was studying Dr. Richards' boarding pass and identification with increasing embarrassment. Everything was in perfect order. The seat assignment was correct, the ticket was valid, and there was absolutely no legitimate reason for this confrontation. She glanced at the security officers who were looking increasingly uncomfortable with their role in what was clearly a discrimination incident. Michael Thompson, the purser, emerged from the galley where he'd been monitoring the situation. As the senior flight attendant, he had the authority to resolve passenger disputes, but he also had to navigate the complex politics of elite customer service. Blake and Veronica's platinum status meant their complaints carried significant weight with airline management. "Dr. Richards," he said carefully, "while your ticket is certainly valid, I wonder if we might find a solution that works for everyone. We have some excellent seats available in our premium economy section, and I'd be happy to offer you complimentary meal service and priority baggage handling as an apology for any inconvenience." The offer was couched in diplomatic language, but its message was clear. Please make this problem go away by accepting a lower-class seat, so we don't have to deal with our elite customers' racism. Dr. Richards studied his face and saw a good man caught in an impossible situation trying to manage competing pressures from corporate policy and basic human decency. "Mr. Thompson," she replied, "I appreciate your desire to resolve this peacefully. However, I paid for this seat. I'm entitled to this seat, and I will be keeping this seat. The problem here isn't my presence. It's their attitude toward my presence." Veronica's composure finally cracked. "Attitude. Excuse me, but we're the ones being reasonable here. We're simply asking for the respect we've earned through our loyalty to this airline. If she wanted first-class treatment, she should have dressed appropriately and shown proper etiquette. The racist subtext was becoming text. Dr. Richards's understated professional attire was somehow inappropriate compared to Veronica's flashy designer outfit. Her quiet dignity was poor etiquette compared to their loud demands and public tantrums. The judgment was based purely on preconceived notions about who belonged where. "Ma'am," said Officer Rodriguez, one of the security guards, "what specific behavior prompted this complaint?" Blake gestured wildly. "She's been argumentative and disrespectful from the moment we politely asked her to consider relocating. She's created a hostile environment for other passengers." "I haven't raised my voice once," Dr. Richards observed. "I haven't used profanity, made threats, or displayed any aggressive behavior. I've simply refused to give up my assigned seat to accommodate your preference for a different demographic mix in first class." Her clinical language stripped away all pretense and laid the situation bare. This wasn't about passenger behavior or flight safety or airline policy. It was about two white passengers who felt uncomfortable sharing space with a black woman and were using their elite status to try to force her removal. Sarah Martinez was visibly struggling with the situation. Her training emphasized customer service and conflict de-escalation, but it also stressed non-discrimination and equal treatment. She was watching two sets of company values collide in real time with her caught in the middle. "Dr. Richards," she said hesitantly, "I'm really sorry about this situation. I want you to know that I don't personally agree with what's happening here. but I'm also concerned about the delay this is causing for other passengers. It was a reasonable concern wrapped around an unreasonable premise. The delay was being caused not by Dr. Richards' presence, but by the Hartwells' refusal to accept that presence. She was being asked to solve a problem she didn't create by sacrificing something she'd legitimately earned. David Kim's livestream viewers were approaching 50,000 and climbing rapidly. Comments were overwhelmingly supportive of Dr. Richards, with many viewers sharing their own experiences of travel discrimination. Aviation industry professionals were beginning to chime in, recognizing her name and credentials. The story was gaining momentum beyond anyone's control. Frank Morrison stood up in his seat, his business attire and obvious frequent flyer status lending weight to his words. "This is absolutely disgusting," he announced to the cabin. "I've been flying for 40 years, and I've seen this kind of behavior far too many times. These people should be ashamed of themselves." His intervention shifted the cabin dynamics. Other passengers began voicing support for Dr. Richards, turning the social pressure back on the Hartwells. What had started as an attempt to isolate and humiliate her was backfiring spectacularly. Veronica's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is ridiculous. We're being treated like criminals for expressing legitimate concerns about our travel experience. All we wanted was a peaceful flight, and instead we're being attacked by social justice warriors." The phrase social justice warriors revealed everything. In her worldview, equality was an attack. Inclusion was aggression, and any challenge to racial hierarchy was persecution of white people. She genuinely saw herself as the victim in this scenario. Blake was pulling out his phone, threatening legal action and corporate complaints. "I'm calling the airline's corporate headquarters. This is completely unacceptable customer service. When they hear how we've been treated, heads are going to roll." He was probably right about heads rolling, just not the heads he expected. Dr. Richards remained an island of calm in the growing storm. She'd experienced this exact scenario in different settings throughout her career. The assumption that she didn't belong, the demand that she prove her right to be there, the escalation when she refused to be moved. What was different this time was the audience and the documentation. Usually these encounters happened in private, leaving no evidence beyond competing narratives. Today the world was watching. Elena was on her radio conferring with her supervisor about how to handle the situation. Gate agents dealt with difficult passengers regularly, but this was different. The complaint had no factual basis. The passenger being complained about was clearly in the right, and the entire incident was being broadcast live to thousands of viewers online. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a voice over the aircraft's public address network. "This is Captain James Morrison speaking. We're currently experiencing a brief delay due to a passenger boarding issue. We should have this resolved shortly and be on our way to Frankfurt. Thank you for your patience." Captain Morrison's calm, authoritative voice provided a momentary respite from the tension, but it also marked a turning point. The delay was now official. The incident was affecting the entire flight. And somewhere in the back of Dr. Harrar, Richards's mind, a small alarm was beginning to sound about the technical issues she'd overheard ground crew discussing earlier. As the confrontation continued to escalate, none of the participants knew that their aircraft was sitting on the ground with a catastrophic navigation computer failure that had stumped every maintenance technician on duty. None of them knew that the delay they were arguing about was actually protecting them from a potentially deadly malfunction that could have caused their plane to lose its way over the Atlantic Ocean. And none of them knew that the solution to their technical crisis was sitting quietly in Seat 1A, enduring their harassment with the patience of someone who had more important things to worry about than the wounded pride of entitled passengers. The storm was about to break, and when it did, everyone would learn exactly how wrong they'd been about who belonged where. Captain James Morrison's voice crackled over the cabin speakers again, but this time there was an edge of concern that hadn't been there before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a slight additional delay while our ground crew addresses a technical issue. We'll keep you updated as we learn more." Dr. Richards' head snapped up from the confrontation. 25 years of aviation experience had taught her to read between the lines of pilot announcements, and that particular phrase pattern triggered every professional instinct she possessed. Technical issue on an aircraft that had already been delayed for technical issues usually meant one thing. The problem was worse than initially thought. She could hear radio chatter bleeding through the cockpit door, fragmentary communications between the ground crew and Flight Operations Center. The words Navicore and primary backup failure reached her ears, causing her heart rate to spike. If what she was hearing was accurate, Flight 447 was dealing with exactly the kind of catastrophic navigation computer malfunction that her networks were designed to prevent. Blake Hartwell was still ranting about customer service violations, completely oblivious to the genuine crisis developing around him. This is exactly the kind of incompetence we shouldn't have to tolerate. First, they let inappropriate passengers into first class, and now they can't even keep their aircraft running on schedule. Dr. Richards stood up slowly, her movement causing a momentary hush in the heated argument. She looked directly at Sarah Martinez, her voice cutting through the chaos with laser precision. "I need to speak with Captain Morrison immediately. Tell him Dr. Simone Richards from Aerotech needs to discuss the Navicore situation." Sarah blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, passengers aren't allowed in the cockpit, and I'm sure the captain is very busy right now." "Tell him exactly what I said, Doctor." Richards interrupted her tone, leaving no room for argument. "Navicore, Aerotech, Dr. Simone Richards. He'll understand." Elena Vasquez had been monitoring ground control communications through her radio, and she'd heard enough to know that the technical delay was becoming a serious problem. Multiple aircraft were being held at gates due to navigation computer malfunctions, and Frankfurt Airport was threatening to close if the issues weren't resolved within the next few hours. Sarah Elena said quietly, "Maybe you should relay her message to the cockpit, if she knows something about the technical problems." Blake exploded. "Are you seriously going to let this disruptive passenger interfere with flight operations? This is getting completely out of hand. I demand to speak with a supervisor immediately." "You're speaking to one," Elena replied coolly. "And right now my priority is getting this aircraft safely to Frankfurt, not managing your seating preferences." The radio chatter from the cockpit was growing more urgent. Dr. Richards could make out references to cascading network failures, backup navigation offline, and most ominously recommend aircraft grounding pending full diagnostic. Her worst fears were being confirmed. This wasn't a simple software glitch or routine maintenance issue. This was a fundamental failure of the flight management computers that could leave an aircraft effectively blind in flight. Captain Morrison's voice came over the PA again, and this time he made no effort to hide his concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We're experiencing some technical difficulties with our navigation computers. Out of an abundance of caution, we're going to deplane all passengers while our maintenance team works to resolve these issues. Please gather your personal belongings and prepare for an orderly exit." The announcement sent a ripple of alarm through the cabin. Passengers began standing, reaching for overhead bins, asking flight attendants what was happening. David Kim was providing running commentary to his live stream, which now had over 100,000 viewers following the developing story. Dr. Richards didn't move toward the exit. Instead, she approached the cockpit door where Sarah was conferring nervously with the purser. "I need you to tell Captain Morrison that the Navicore failure is likely cascading through the integrated avionics network. If he's seeing primary and backup navigation offline simultaneously, he's dealing with corrupted firmware in the central processing unit." Sarah stared at her blankly. The technical language was beyond her understanding, but the confidence and specificity in Dr. Richards' voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a passenger trying to insert herself into flight operations. This was an expert trying to help solve a crisis. I'll relay that message," Sarah said, knocking on the cockpit door. Captain Morrison emerged moments later, his usual composed demeanor showing cracks of stress. At 54, he was a veteran pilot who'd seen every kind of emergency aviation could throw at him. But navigation computer failures were particularly dangerous because they could leave an aircraft fundamentally lost. When Sarah delivered Dr. Richards' message, his expression changed completely. Dr. Simone Richards, the aerotech engineer who designed the Navicore architecture. He looked at her with new eyes, seeing not a passenger in a seating dispute, but one of the most respected professionals in his industry. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something that's going to sound completely inappropriate given what's been happening in this cabin, but would you be willing to take a look at our navigation computers?" The request was unprecedented. Passengers weren't allowed in cockpits during operations, and airline policy strictly prohibited unauthorized personnel from accessing aircraft networks. But Captain Morrison was facing a choice between protocol and safety always won. Blake Hartwell's jaw dropped. "You're going to let a passenger into the cockpit? This is completely insane. I'm reporting this entire crew to the FAA." Captain Morrison turned to face him, his authority as aircraft commander suddenly filling the space like a physical presence. "Sir, Dr. Richards isn't just a passenger. She's the engineer who designed the computer network that's currently malfunctioning. If anyone can help us solve this problem and get everyone safely to Frankfurt, it's her." The revelation hit the Hartwells like a physical blow. The woman they'd been trying to force out of first class wasn't just an aerospace engineer. She was the aerospace engineer whose work was directly relevant to their current crisis. Their attempt to humiliate her had backfired so spectacularly that she was now being invited to literally save their flight. If this story is hitting you the way it hit everyone on that plane, make sure you're subscribed because what happens next is going to blow your mind. Dr. Richards isn't just fighting for her seat anymore. She's about to save an entire flight. Dr. Richards followed Captain Morrison into the cockpit where First Officer Janet Kim and Flight Engineer Carlos Rodriguez were hunched over multiple screens displaying error messages and network warnings. The navigation displays were dark, the flight management computers were showing critical faults, and backup networks were throwing cascading error codes. "Show me what you're seeing," Dr. Richards said, settling into the jump seat and surveying the damage. Captain Morrison pointed to the primary navigation display. "We lost Navicore primary about 90 minutes ago. Backup came online normally, but then we started seeing intermittent errors. About 20 minutes ago, the backup network failed completely, and now we're showing total navigation computer offline." Dr. Richards studied the error code scrolling across the maintenance screen, her trained eye immediately recognizing patterns that would be meaningless to even experienced pilots. "This isn't a hardware failure," she said after a few minutes. "Someone uploaded corrupted firmware during your last maintenance cycle. The code is trying to execute navigation calculations using invalid parameters, which is causing both the primary and backup networks to crash." First Officer Kim looked up from her checklist. "Is that something we can fix from here?" "Possibly," Dr. Richards replied, pulling out her tablet and connecting it to the aircraft's maintenance port. "I need to access the central processing unit and identify exactly which firmware modules are corrupted. Then I can patch the code remotely using my development tools." She worked in focused silence for several minutes, her fingers flying across the tablet screen as she navigated through layers of complex code. The cockpit crew watched in fascination as she identified the source of the malfunction, a routine software update that had been installed incorrectly, corrupting the navigation algorithms that calculated the aircraft's position and flight path. "Here's the problem," she said, pointing to a section of code on her screen. "The navigation update that was installed yesterday overwrote critical subroutines in the positioning software. Every time the network tries to calculate your current location, it's getting nonsensical results, which triggers a safety shutdown." Captain Morrison leaned over her shoulder. "How long would it take you to fix it?" Dr. Richards was already working her development software, interfacing directly with the aircraft's computers. "I need about 30 minutes to rewrite the corrupted modules and test the patches." "But Captain, there's something else you need to know. This same firmware was distributed to hundreds of aircraft over the past week. If my patch works, we need to alert every airline using Navicore networks immediately. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Richards was correct, aviation authorities worldwide were dealing with a potential fleet-wide navigation network failure that could affect thousands of flights and hundreds of thousands of passengers. The incident on Flight 447 was just the tip of an iceberg that threatened the entire commercial aviation industry. Through the cockpit windows, they could see ground crew members running between aircraft emergency vehicles positioned near multiple gates and the controlled chaos of an airport, dealing with multiple aircraft emergencies simultaneously. What had started as a routine software update had become an aviation crisis of unprecedented scope. Dr. Richards continued working her code patches flowing through the aircraft's computers like digital medicine healing a wounded patient. She was simultaneously debugging the corrupted software, rewriting critical navigation algorithms, and developing a universal patch that could be distributed to other affected aircraft. Navicore primary network coming online. Flight engineer Rodriguez reported, watching his instruments with amazement. "I'm showing normal initialization sequence. Backup network synchronized," added First Officer Kim. "All navigation computers are showing green status." But Dr. Richards wasn't finished. She was running comprehensive diagnostics on every connected network, checking for secondary infections that might have spread from the corrupted navigation software to other aircraft networks. Her tablet displayed real-time data flows from engines, flight controls, communication networks, and weather radar. "Captain, you need to contact Frankfurt Control immediately," she said without looking up from her work. "The same firmware corruption that affected your navigation networks also compromised your weather radar integration. If you'd taken off with these networks online, you could have lost weather tracking capability over the Atlantic." Captain Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Weather radar failure over the ocean was potentially catastrophic, especially during winter months when severe storms could develop rapidly. Dr. Richards hadn't just fixed their navigation computers. She'd potentially saved their lives. "How did you catch that?" he asked. "Because I designed the integration protocols," she replied matter-of-factly. "I know exactly how these networks interact with each other, and I know what happens when the code gets corrupted. Weather radar uses navigation data to calculate storm positions relative to the aircraft. With corrupted navigation software, your weather display would have been showing storm cells in completely wrong locations." The cockpit fell silent as the full implications sank in. They hadn't just been dealing with a navigation computer problem. They'd been looking at a potentially deadly cascade of network failures that could have left them blind to both their position and the weather around them. In the middle of winter over the North Atlantic, that combination could have been fatal. Dr. Richards continued her diagnostic work, her expertise extending far beyond simple software patches. She was analyzing data flows, checking network integrations, and verifying that every connected component was functioning properly. Her tablet had become a window into the aircraft's digital nervous network, allowing her to identify and fix problems that ground maintenance crews hadn't even discovered yet. "I'm also seeing some anomalies in your fuel management software," she reported. "Not critical, but worth addressing before departure. The network is calculating fuel consumption based on corrupted navigation data, which means your fuel gauges aren't showing accurate range information." Captain Morrison shook his head in amazement. One passenger's expertise was revealing layer after layer of problems that could have compromised the safety of everyone on board. The woman his crew had been asked to remove from first class was literally ensuring that Flight 447 could complete its journey safely. News of Dr. Richards' work was spreading rapidly through aviation industry networks. Aerotech's operations center was coordinating with airlines worldwide to distribute her patches to affected aircraft. Frankfurt Airport was delaying departures while crews implemented her fixes. The woman who had been treated as an unwelcome intrusion was now being recognized as the solution to an international aviation crisis. David Kim's live stream was being picked up by major news networks, transforming a local incident into a global story about discrimination competence and the unexpected ways that expertise could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Comments were pouring in from aviation professionals around the world, many of whom recognized Dr. Richards' name and were expressing amazement at the real-time demonstration of her skills. As Dr. Richards put the finishing touches on her comprehensive network repair, she realized that her work had implications far beyond Flight 447. The corrupted firmware had been distributed as a routine update to thousands of aircraft, meaning that airlines worldwide were unknowingly operating with compromised navigation and weather radar networks. Her patches would need to be distributed globally to prevent potential disasters. "Captain, I need you to patch me through to Aerotech's Emergency Operations Center," she said. "This firmware corruption is industry-wide, and we need to get patches distributed to every affected aircraft immediately. We're looking at a potential fleet-wide grounding if this isn't addressed within the next few hours." Captain Morrison handed her the aircraft's satellite communication network, watching in amazement as a passenger dispute transformed into a demonstration of technical expertise that was literally reshaping aviation safety protocols in real time. Through the cockpit windows, passengers could be seen gathering in the gate area, many of them following David Kim's live stream and beginning to understand the true nature of the crisis their aircraft had been facing. The woman some of them had watched being harassed in first class was now working to ensure their safe arrival in Frankfurt. The irony was not lost on anyone. The person who had been deemed inappropriate for first class was the only person on the aircraft capable of getting them safely to their destination. Dr. Richards' voice carried the calm authority of mission control as she coordinated with Aerotech's Emergency Operations Center. "This is Dr. Simone Richards calling from Global Wings Flight 447. We have a critical Navicore firmware corruption affecting multiple aircraft networks. I need immediate patch distribution to all carriers using Navicore architecture." The response from Aerotech was immediate. "Dr. Richards, we've been tracking reports of navigation anomalies from 17 different airlines. Can you confirm the source of the corruption?" "Confirmed." She replied, her fingers still working across her tablet. The maintenance update pushed on November 18th contained corrupted navigation algorithms. "I'm transmitting a comprehensive patch now, but we need industry-wide implementation within the next 3 hours." Through the aircraft's satellite communication network, her patches were being uploaded to Aerotech's central servers for immediate distribution to airlines around the world. Flight 447 had become ground zero for one of the most significant aviation safety responses in recent history, and it was all being orchestrated by a passenger who had been told she didn't belong in first class. Captain Morrison watched in fascination as Dr. Richards transformed his cockpit into a command center for international aviation safety. Her expertise extended far beyond software engineering. She understood the operational implications of her work, the regulatory requirements for emergency patches, and the coordination necessary to prevent a potential industry-wide crisis. "Captain, I need you to contact Frankfurt Control and request a priority approach corridor," she said without looking up from her work. "Once other airlines start implementing these patches, there's going to be a backlog of delayed flights trying to reach European airports. If we can complete our pre-flight checks and depart within the next 90 minutes, we can beat the rush." The strategic thinking impressed him even more than the technical competence. Dr. Richards wasn't just solving the immediate problem. She was thinking several moves ahead, anticipating the cascade effects of her solution, and positioning Flight 447 to minimize the impact on their passengers' schedules. Flight engineer Rodriguez was monitoring the aircraft's networks as Dr. Richards's patches took effect. All navigation computers showing nominal performance. Weather radar integration restored. Fuel management calculations corrected. "Ma'am, I've been working on aircraft for 15 years and I've never seen anything like this." Dr. Richards smiled briefly. "You've also never had someone who designed these networks sitting in your cockpit when they failed. I know every line of code, every integration protocol, every potential failure mode. When something goes wrong, I don't just see the symptoms, I see the underlying cause." Her tablet was displaying real-time status reports from aircraft around the world as airlines implemented her patches. Lufthansa reported successful navigation restoration on 12 aircraft. British Airways confirmed weather radar functionality on their entire fleet. Air France was clearing delayed flights for departure after implementing the emergency updates. Dr. Richards came a voice through the satellite communication network. This is Aerotech CEO Michael Harrison. Your patches have prevented what could have been a catastrophic industry-wide failure. We're looking at potential cost savings in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and more importantly, you've prevented possible loss of life from compromised navigation networks. The recognition from her company's highest leadership was being broadcast through the aircraft's communication network, ensuring that everyone in the cockpit understood exactly who they were dealing with. The passenger who had been dismissed as inappropriate was being personally thanked by one of the most powerful executives in the aviation industry. Captain Morrison felt a deep shame settling in his chest as he realized how close they'd come to removing Dr. Richards from the aircraft. If the Hartwells had succeeded in their discrimination campaign, Flight 447 would still be grounded with unsolvable technical problems, and hundreds of other aircraft worldwide would be flying with compromised safety networks. Dr. Richards, he said quietly, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond what happened in the cabin. Your work has probably saved lives today. She looked up from her tablet for the first time in over an hour. Captain, that's exactly why discrimination is so dangerous. You never know whose expertise you're dismissing when you judge people based on appearance rather than competence. Today it was navigation computers. Tomorrow it could be medical expertise in an emergency or engineering knowledge during a crisis, or any one of 1,000 skills that might be needed exactly when you least expect them. Her words carried the weight of lived experience, the accumulated wisdom of someone who had spent her entire career proving herself in environments where her presence was questioned before her competence was evaluated. The lesson was larger than aviation, larger than this particular incident, and everyone in the cockpit understood its implications. First Officer Kim was coordinating with ground control to finalize their departure clearance. Frankfurt Control confirms priority departure in 45 minutes. All networks green for Atlantic crossing. Dr. Richards. They've also asked if you'd be willing to remain available by satellite communication during the flight, in case other airlines encounter implementation problems with your patches. The request transformed Dr. Richards from passenger to critical aviation infrastructure. Her expertise was now considered essential to the safe operation of commercial aircraft worldwide, at least until the corrupted firmware crisis was fully resolved. The irony of being asked to work during a flight she'd nearly been removed from was not lost on anyone. I'll be available, she confirmed. But I should mention that I need to review my presentation for the Aviation Safety Summit tomorrow. Ironically, my keynote speech is about the critical importance of diversity in aerospace engineering teams. Today's events have provided some very relevant real-world examples. The mention of her keynote speech provided another shock to the network. Dr. Richards wasn't just any aerospace engineer. She was being honored by the international aviation community for her contributions to flight safety. The woman they'd tried to force out of first class was literally the guest of honor at the most prestigious aviation safety conference in the world. News of the incident was spreading beyond aviation circles. David Kim's live stream had been picked up by major news networks, and the story was trending globally on social media. Dr. Simone Richards was generating hundreds of thousands of posts celebrating her technical expertise and criticizing the discrimination she'd faced. Aviation professionals worldwide were sharing their own stories of her work, describing how her navigation networks had prevented accidents, improved fuel efficiency, and enhanced flight safety. Pilots were posting testimonials about the reliability of Navicore technology. Engineers were explaining the complexity of the real-time debugging she'd performed. The narrative was crystallizing. A brilliant black engineer had been racially profiled by entitled passengers, then had to prove her worth by literally saving their flight and hundreds of others around the world. The story had everything: Injustice, competence, irony, and ultimate vindication. Captain Morrison made a decision that would resonate throughout the aviation industry. He picked up the aircraft's public address microphone and addressed not just the passengers of Flight 447, but the worldwide audience following the story through social media. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison. I want to take a moment to address what has happened on this aircraft today. Dr. Simone Richards, who some of you witnessed being harassed in our first-class cabin, has just prevented what could have been a catastrophic international aviation crisis. His voice carried through the cabin and through David Kim's live stream to hundreds of thousands of viewers worldwide. Dr. Richards designed the navigation computers that keep aircraft safely on course. When those networks failed today, she worked for over 2 hours to identify the problem, develop a solution, and coordinate the worldwide distribution of emergency patches that have restored normal operations to hundreds of aircraft. The captain paused, letting the implications sink in. The passengers who demanded her removal from first class had no way of knowing that she was exactly the person we needed most when this crisis developed. But that's precisely why discrimination is not just morally wrong, it's operationally dangerous. When you judge people based on appearance rather than competence, you risk losing access to exactly the expertise you need most. His words were being recorded, shared, and quoted across social media platforms. The incident was becoming a case study in the practical consequences of prejudice, demonstrating how bias could literally endanger lives by driving away the people most capable of solving critical problems. Dr. Richards continued monitoring aircraft networks worldwide as her patches were implemented across the global fleet. Her tablet had become a window into the operational status of commercial aviation, showing real-time updates as airlines restored normal navigation and weather radar functionality. "Captain, we're seeing successful implementation across all major carriers," she reported. "Lufthansa, British Airways, Air France, Delta, United. Everyone is reporting normal operations. The crisis is contained." But her work wasn't finished. As airlines implemented her emergency patches, new questions were emerging about the source of the corrupted firmware and the processes that had allowed such dangerous code to be distributed industry-wide. Dr. Richards was already developing enhanced diagnostic tools that would prevent similar incidents in the future. This event is going to trigger a complete review of software update protocols across the aviation industry, she explained to the cockpit crew. "We'll need better testing procedures, enhanced quality control, and improved fail-safe mechanisms to ensure that corrupted code never reaches operational aircraft again." Her analysis was being transmitted to aviation safety authorities worldwide, influencing the development of new regulations and safety protocols that would protect commercial aviation for years to come. The passenger, who had been deemed inappropriate for first class, was literally rewriting international aviation safety standards in real time. Flight engineer Rodriguez was completing the final pre-flight checks, all networks now showing normal status thanks to Dr. Richards' intervention. "Ma'am, I just want to say that watching you work has been the most impressive thing I've witnessed in my entire aviation career. You didn't just fix our aircraft, you fixed the entire industry." The personal testimonial was being captured by David Kim's ongoing live stream, adding to the growing recognition of Dr. Richards' extraordinary competence and professionalism. Comments were pouring in from aviation professionals around the world, many sharing their own stories of working with her and praising her technical skills. As departure time approached, Dr. Richards was putting the finishing touches on her diagnostic protocols, ensuring that Flight 447's networks were not just functional, but optimally calibrated for the Atlantic crossing. Her attention to detail extended beyond the immediate crisis to long-term operational efficiency and safety margins. "All networks are now performing better than manufacturer specifications," she announced to the cockpit crew. "Navigation accuracy is enhanced, fuel efficiency calculations are optimized, and weather radar sensitivity is improved. This aircraft is now safer than it was before the crisis began." The transformation was complete. Dr. Richards had not only solved the immediate problem but had left Flight 447 in better condition than its original configuration. Her expertise had turned a potential disaster into an opportunity for improvement, demonstrating the kind of innovative thinking that had made her one of the most respected engineers in the aviation industry. As the aircraft prepared for departure, the contrast with the earlier discrimination incident could not have been more stark. The woman who had been told she didn't belong in first class had just demonstrated competence that literally kept aircraft safely in the sky worldwide. The passengers who had tried to force her removal owed their safe journey to her expertise and professionalism. The story was becoming legend in real time, shared across continents, and inspiring conversations about bias, competence, and the hidden expertise that exists in every community. Dr. Simone Richards had proven that excellence comes in many forms, and that judging people by appearance rather than ability is not just morally wrong, it can be genuinely dangerous. Captain Morrison emerged from the cockpit with the measured stride of someone who had just witnessed something extraordinary. The cabin fell silent as he surveyed the passengers, his eyes eventually settling on Blake and Veronica Hartwell, who were huddled in their seats looking significantly less confident than they had 2 hours earlier. Dr. Richards followed behind him, her tablet tucked under her arm, looking tired but satisfied. The work of debugging corrupted aviation software and coordinating international safety responses had been mentally exhausting, but she'd prevented what could have been a genuine catastrophe for commercial aviation worldwide. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Morrison announced, his voice carrying the full authority of his position, "I want to address what has happened on this aircraft today, and I want every passenger to understand exactly what you've witnessed." David Kim's live stream was now being followed by over 300,000 viewers, with major news networks providing live commentary. The hashtag #FlightJustice was trending globally. The story had transcended a simple discrimination incident to become a worldwide conversation about bias, competence, and the hidden costs of prejudice. Dr. Simone Richards, the passenger some of you witnessed being harassed earlier, has just saved not only our flight, but hundreds of flights worldwide. She identified and corrected a critical navigation network failure that was affecting aircraft across multiple continents. Her expertise prevented what could have been a catastrophic international aviation crisis. Blake Hartwell's face had gone pale. The confident arrogance he'd displayed earlier had evaporated as the full implications of the situation became clear. The woman he'd tried to force out of first class had literally saved his life and the lives of everyone on the aircraft. Veronica sat frozen, her designer handbag clutched in her lap, staring at Dr. Richards with an expression of shock and dawning horror at what she'd done. The casual racism that had seemed so natural 2 hours earlier now appeared monstrous in the light of Dr. Richards's demonstrated competence and grace. Captain Morrison continued, his voice growing harder as he addressed the discrimination that had occurred under his command. What I witnessed in this cabin earlier was not just morally reprehensible, it was operationally dangerous. Dr. Richards's expertise was exactly what we needed when our aircraft networks failed, and she provided that expertise despite being subjected to harassment and discrimination. Sarah Martinez stood nearby, tears streaming down her face as she realized how close she'd come to being complicit in removing the one person who could solve their crisis. Her training had emphasized customer service, but she'd learned today that sometimes customer service meant protecting passengers from other passengers' prejudice. Federal aviation regulations grant me final authority over all matters affecting the safety and security of this aircraft, Captain Morrison announced. This includes the removal of passengers whose behavior creates a hostile or unsafe environment for other travelers or crew members. The formal language carried the weight of law and regulation. This wasn't personal vindictiveness or social justice activism. This was aviation safety protocol being applied to protect the integrity of flight operations and the dignity of passengers. Elena Vasquez had been monitoring the situation from the jet bridge, coordinating with airport security and Global Wings management. The company's legal department was already involved, recognizing that the incident had legal, regulatory, and public relations implications that extended far beyond a simple customer service complaint. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, Captain Morrison said, turning to face them directly, "Your behavior on this aircraft has violated multiple federal regulations regarding passenger conduct discrimination and interference with flight operations. You attempted to have a passenger removed based solely on racial bias, created a hostile environment that delayed departure, and interfered with crew duties during a safety emergency." Blake started to protest, but Captain Morrison cut him off with a gesture that brooked no argument. "You will be deplaning immediately. Airport security will escort you from the aircraft. I am filing a formal incident report with the Federal Aviation Administration, and Global Wings Management will be conducting a comprehensive review of your travel privileges with this airline." The announcement was met with spontaneous applause from other passengers. Frank Morrison was clapping loudest, his businessman's perspective giving him clear insight into the justice being served. David Kim was providing live commentary to his massive online audience, describing the moment as accountability meeting entitlement in real time. Veronica finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a whimper than the confident demand she'd intended. "You can't do this to us. We're Platinum Elite members. We've spent thousands of dollars with this airline. Elite status doesn't grant you the right to discriminate against fellow passengers," Captain Morrison replied coolly. "Your spending history with Global Wings will not protect you from the consequences of violating federal aviation regulations and basic human decency." Sarah Martinez approached the Hartwells with 2 airport security officers, her demeanor now professional and uncompromising. The young woman, who had wavered earlier between company policy and moral clarity, had found her footing on the right side of both. "Please gather your belongings," she told them firmly. "You'll need to come with us." As Blake and Veronica collected their items from the overhead bins, the cabin remained silent, except for the sound of David Kim's continuing live-stream commentary. Other passengers watched with expressions ranging from satisfaction to outright joy as justice unfolded in real time. Dr. Richards remained in her seat, neither gloating nor engaging with the drama. She'd seen this kind of discrimination countless times before, and while she was satisfied to see consequences being applied, her focus was already shifting back to her work and the international aviation crisis she'd helped resolve. Elena Vasquez boarded the aircraft with official paperwork documenting the incident for legal and regulatory authorities. The discrimination complaint would be processed through multiple channels: FAA enforcement, airline internal review, and potential civil rights violations. "Dr. Richards," she said quietly on behalf of Global Wings, "I want to apologize for what you experienced today. Your treatment was completely unacceptable, and the company will be reviewing all policies and procedures to ensure this never happens again." The apology was sincere, but Dr. Richards understood that institutional change required more than individual remorse. "I appreciate that, Elena. But complex problems require organizational solutions. I hope Global Wings will use this incident to examine why discrimination was initially accommodated rather than immediately stopped." Her response demonstrated the kind of intellectual rigor that had made her successful as an engineer, focusing on root causes rather than surface symptoms, seeking comprehensive solutions rather than temporary fixes. Blake and Veronica's walk of shame down the aircraft aisle was captured in detail by multiple passenger phones, creating a permanent record of consequences for racial discrimination. Comments on social media were overwhelmingly supportive of their removal, with many viewers sharing their own experiences of travel discrimination. As they reached the aircraft door, Blake made one final attempt to assert his perceived authority. "This isn't over. Our lawyers will be hearing about this. We'll sue the airline, the captain, and anyone else involved in this travesty." Captain Morrison's response was immediate and definitive. "Sir, I encourage you to pursue whatever legal remedies you think appropriate. I'm confident that any review of today's events will support the actions taken by this crew to protect our passengers from discrimination and harassment." The security escort continued without further incident, but the Hartwells' threats of litigation were being recorded and would become part of the permanent documentation of their behavior. Their attempt to weaponize the legal network against the consequences of their own actions was just another demonstration of the entitlement that had created the problem in the first place. Captain Morrison made one final announcement to the cabin before returning to his pre-flight preparations. Ladies and gentlemen, this incident demonstrates why discrimination has no place in commercial aviation or any other aspect of our society. Dr. Richards's expertise saved our flight today, but more importantly, her grace under pressure showed us all what dignity looks like when faced with prejudice. The applause that followed was sustained and heartfelt recognition not just of Dr. Richards's technical competence, but of her moral strength in the face of ugly treatment. She acknowledged the recognition with a modest nod, then returned her attention to her tablet where she was monitoring the continued global implementation of her navigation network patches. As the aircraft door closed and final departure preparations began, the atmosphere in the cabin had been completely transformed. The tension and conflict that had dominated the early boarding experience had been replaced by a sense of justice served and competence recognized. Other passengers were approaching Dr. Richards to express their admiration and support. Frank Morrison introduced himself as a fellow aerospace professional who had followed her career for years. A young Hispanic engineering student named Maria Santos asked for career advice. An elderly German couple thanked her in broken English for making their flight possible. Sarah Martinez approached Dr. Richards' seat with a bottle of champagne and a handwritten note. Dr. Richards, this is from the entire crew. We want you to know how sorry we are for what happened earlier and how grateful we are for everything you've done today. Dr. Richards accepted the champagne graciously, but set it aside unopened. Sarah, what happened today wasn't your fault. You were caught between competing pressures and conflicting policies. The important thing is that you learned something that will help you handle similar situations in the future. Her forgiveness was as remarkable as her technical expertise, demonstrating the kind of emotional intelligence and professional grace that had earned her respect throughout the aviation industry. She understood that lasting change came through education and understanding, not revenge or humiliation. As Flight 447 finally pushed back from the gate more than 3 hours behind schedule, the delay had been transformed from a source of frustration into a demonstration of how competence and justice could triumph over prejudice and entitlement. The story was already being discussed in aviation industry publications, civil rights organizations, and engineering schools worldwide. Dr. Richards opened her laptop and began reviewing her presentation for the next day's Aviation Safety Summit, incorporating the day's events as a real-world example of why diversity in engineering teams wasn't just a moral imperative, but an operational necessity. Her keynote speech would now have immediate relevance and powerful supporting evidence drawn from her own experience. The passenger who had been told she didn't belong in first class was about to address the most prestigious gathering of aviation safety professionals in the world, using her own story as proof that excellence comes from unexpected places, and that judging people by appearance rather than ability was not just wrong but genuinely dangerous. The ripple effects of Dr. Richards' intervention began spreading through the aviation industry before Flight 447 even reached cruising altitude. Her emergency patches were being implemented across global airline networks, with aviation authorities on 6 continents, coordinating the largest simultaneous aircraft software update in commercial aviation history. Aerotech's Emergency Operations Center had become the nerve center for international aviation safety, with Dr. Richards participating via satellite link from 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. Her real-time consultation was helping airlines worldwide navigate the complex process of installing her navigation network corrections while maintaining normal flight operations. Dr. Richards, this is Frankfurt Control, came a voice through the aircraft's communication network. We're showing successful implementation of your patches across our entire European network. All aircraft are reporting normal navigation and weather radar functionality. On behalf of European aviation authorities, we want to express our gratitude for preventing what could have been a catastrophic safety crisis. The recognition from international aviation authorities was being broadcast through Flight 447's cabin, ensuring that every passenger understood the global significance of Dr. Richards' work. David Kim's live stream, now approaching 500,000 viewers, was providing real-time coverage of how one woman's expertise had prevented an international aviation disaster. Global Wings CEO Margaret Thompson placed a personal call to Flight 447, her message transmitted through the aircraft's public address network. Dr. Richards, this is Margaret Thompson. On behalf of Global Wings Airlines, I want to formally apologize for the discrimination you experienced today and personally thank you for your extraordinary service to aviation safety. The CEO's direct intervention demonstrated how the incident had escalated to the highest levels of corporate leadership. Effective immediately, Global Wings is implementing enhanced anti-discrimination training for all customer service personnel, revised policies for handling bias complaints, and new procedures to ensure that elite passenger status cannot be used to override basic civil rights. The policy changes were being announced in real time, showing how Dr. Richards' experience was driving immediate institutional reform. Other airlines were monitoring Global Wings' response and developing their own enhanced anti-discrimination protocols, creating industry-wide change that extended far beyond the original incident. News coverage of the story was expanding beyond aviation into broader discussions about workplace discrimination, hidden expertise, and the practical consequences of racial bias. Engineering schools were using Dr. Richards' story in discussions about diversity and inclusion, while civil rights organizations were highlighting it as an example of how prejudice could literally endanger lives. The International Aviation Safety Summit in Frankfurt announced that Dr. Richards' keynote speech would be broadcast live worldwide, with simultaneous translation into 12 languages. Her presentation about diversity in aerospace engineering teams had gained urgent relevance thanks to the day's events, and aviation professionals globally were eager to hear her insights. Captain Morrison made a final announcement as Flight 447 began its descent into Frankfurt. Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching our destination after one of the most remarkable flights in my 25-year aviation career. Dr. Richards' expertise not only saved our aircraft but prevented a potential international aviation crisis affecting hundreds of flights and hundreds of thousands of passengers worldwide. The recognition was met with sustained applause, but Dr. Richards was already focused on the broader implications of the day's events. Her tablet displayed real-time data from aircraft around the world showing the successful global implementation of her navigation network patches and the restoration of normal aviation operations. The real victory here, she told a reporter via satellite link, isn't that my patches fixed the immediate crisis. It's that this incident has sparked conversations about inclusion and expertise that were long overdue. When organizations deliberately exclude talented people based on bias, they don't just commit moral wrongs, they create operational vulnerabilities. Her analysis was being quoted in real time by news outlets worldwide, transforming a discrimination incident into a business case study about the practical benefits of diversity and inclusion. The story had become larger than aviation, serving as proof that excluding people based on prejudice wasn't just ethically wrong, but strategically dangerous. As Flight 447 touched down in Frankfurt, Dr. Richards was greeted by a delegation from the International Aviation Safety Summit, including industry leaders, safety regulators, and engineering professionals from around the world. The woman who had been told she didn't belong in first class was receiving a hero's welcome from the global aviation community. The Hartwells, meanwhile, were being processed through legal and administrative channels back at JFK Airport. Their lifetime ban from Global Wings had been extended to include the airline's international partners, effectively preventing them from flying with any major carrier worldwide. Their attempt to use privilege as a weapon against an innocent passenger had destroyed their own travel privileges permanently. Blake's threats of litigation had evaporated when his lawyers explained the legal reality. His behavior was clearly documented, violated multiple federal regulations, and had been witnessed by hundreds of people through live-streamed video. No competent attorney would take a case defending racially motivated harassment of a passenger who had subsequently saved the flight. Richards's presentation at the Aviation Safety Summit the following day became one of the most watched technical presentations in industry history. Her real-world demonstration of how bias could blind organizations to available expertise resonated with professionals who had witnessed similar dynamics in their own careers. Yesterday, I experienced something that happens to talented people from underrepresented groups every day, she told the international audience. I was judged based on appearance rather than capability, dismissed despite having relevant expertise, and nearly removed from a situation where my skills were desperately needed. This kind of bias doesn't just hurt individuals, it creates dangerous blind spots in our organizations and communities. Her speech was interrupted multiple times by standing ovations from aviation professionals who recognized the truth of her observations. The incident on Flight 447 had provided dramatic proof of theoretical concepts that diversity advocates had been promoting for decades. Within 6 months, Dr. Richards's story had become required reading in business schools, engineering programs, and civil rights training curricula worldwide. The incident demonstrated how discrimination wasn't just a social problem, but an operational risk that could literally cost lives in critical situations. Airlines globally implemented new procedures, ensuring that passenger expertise could be identified and utilized during emergencies, regardless of the passenger's appearance or background. The Dr. Richards Protocol became standard industry practice for recognizing and leveraging hidden expertise during aviation crises. Most importantly, the story inspired countless individuals who had faced similar discrimination in their own careers. Dr. Richards received thousands of messages from people thanking her for demonstrating that competence and dignity could triumph over prejudice and entitlement, that excellence spoke louder than bias, and that the right person in the right place at the right time could change everything. The lasting legacy of Flight 447 wasn't just the technical innovations Dr. Richards had implemented, but the cultural shift she had inspired. Her grace under pressure, expertise in crisis, and commitment to positive change had shown the world what true leadership looked like, regardless of who was doing the leading or where they were sitting when they did it. 6 months later, Dr. Simone Richards received a letter from a young Latina girl in Texas who had seen the viral video. Because of you, it read, I want to become an aerospace engineer. Thank you for showing me that my brain matters more than what people think when they look at me. Dr. Richards framed that letter and hung it in her office. A reminder that sometimes the most important flights aren't the ones that take you somewhere new. They're the ones that clear the path for others to follow. The Navigation Enhancement Project she launched after the incident had recruited over 200 young women and minorities into aerospace careers, each one inspired by seeing expertise triumph over prejudice at 35,000 feet. The Hartwells never flew first class again, their story becoming a cautionary tale taught in business schools about the true cost of prejudice. But this story isn't really about them. It's about Dr. Richards, who faced hatred with grace, ignorance with intelligence, and discrimination with dignity. She didn't just keep a plane in the sky. She elevated an entire industry's understanding of where talent really comes from. Her Navicore networks now include diversity protocols, ensuring that expertise is recognized regardless of its source, a technical innovation born from personal experience with bias. What did you think about Dr. Richards' incredible response? Have you ever witnessed a moment where competence conquered prejudice? Let us know in the comments below. If this story inspired you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to see what happens when you refuse to be moved from where you belong. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. we've got more incredible stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Thanks for watching, and remember, your seat at the table isn't determined by what others think you deserve. It's earned by what you bring to the flight.